Hi everybody, Jason here from AV Pro Edge. It is Monday, and that means we have another session in our expert audio series with Anthony Grimani. Anthony, how are you?
I am doing great. And how about you, Jason?
Good to hear from you. It looks like you're in a nice dedicated theater room back there. I love seeing those acoustic treatments on the wall.
Yeah, thank you. I'm back in one of our showrooms over here that have let's see, it's a little hard to see, but we've got a bunch of our Sonatus treatments over here, a bunch of our speakers behind me. Screen has been taken down as we're doing some changes
Sure.
and maintenance. And here, I'll pick up the camera and move it around. And over there, yeah, you can't see it. Never mind.
It's a little dark.
Is actually a whole bunch of subwoofers that are lined up for our final burn-in and QC process, where we,
Oh,
we
that is
put
awesome.
subwoofers in pairs out of phase with each other and let them cook for typically 3-4 days, really loud, but because they're out of polarity, there's
Sure.
no sound that escapes. And then because they're out of polarity, we can actually hear any remaining sound that's not supposed to be there, which is called distortion. And we do
Interesting.
everything we can to like get rid of all that stuff. So
Yeah, so we have we're well over our halfway point in the audio expert series with you here, and I know one of our sessions coming up is going to be talking about speaker specs and things like that. And actually,
yeah.
now that you bring up that point of breaking in speakers, I think that's something that we should talk about during that session because it's a mechanical device and we do have to give it some exercise just like a TV. So that's an interesting point that you brought up there.
Right.
Very
Well,
good.
we try to exercise them and make sure. It's funny. We try to break the speakers so that by the time they leave from here, if we can't break them, chances are they won't break out in the field.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Excellent. Excellent. Well, today's session is going to be really interesting. Today's day and age, we're dealing with 85-inch flat panels, and we've got micro LEDs coming, and that kind of changes the game a little bit when it comes to placing speakers in the theater. And you being the acoustician and the audio guru, I thought this would be a great time to talk to you about, what are we going to do when the time comes where we can't put speakers behind the display anymore? So as we go through today's presentation, guys, feel free. I've got the question box open here right in front of me. Feel free to type those questions in, and Anthony and I will do our best to answer those for you. With that being said, Anthony, I think we can pretty much get going from here.
Fantastic. Hey, quick sound check. Am I loud enough? Am I too
Yeah,
quiet? Am I too good?
not, look good. You
On your
sound good.
level? I
Yeah,
got a
and
whole
for
preamplifier I can turn up and everything.
yeah, it sounds good for me. And for those of you who are watching this live, by the way, if you do want to see Anthony's slides a little bit bigger, you can grab this little slider on your screen and move it up and down or left and right. That'll make mine and Anthony's cameras a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, and maybe you could see the slides a little bit better. If you are watching a recorded session, honestly, or obviously the slider's not going to work for you, unfortunately. So if you are watching live, feel free to do that. And with that being said, all right, Anthony, let's get moving.
Excellent. And if you're watching a recorded session, know that you can still send questions.
Yes,
Jason will
good
receive
point.
those, parse those out, and I'll answer those. I realize I'm actually about a session or two late on answering questions. Had a really busy past 2 weeks here. I'm going to get back to those answers really soon here. So thanks for your patience on that.
Excellent. Sure thing. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yep, nice and
All
full. Looks
right.
good.
Excellent. So, yeah, so the session is a little bit of rehash on some of the ideal concepts of placing front speakers in a room, which I've actually addressed a few sessions ago. I will do a quick refresher because it's always interesting to talk about this stuff again. But I'm really going to delve more into like, okay, so the world is trying to get away from projectors and screens, um, partially because they're impractical, and partially because there's technology makers that have made these big screen systems and they want to find places to push them. So I'm
Hmm.
seeing both a pull and a push on this topic. So um, not to name names, Samsung's been extremely active at promoting their large screen arrays for all kinds of
Hmm.
applications, including big movie theaters. And you go, well, what's wrong with projectors in movie theaters? Well, nothing and everything. The biggest issue, of course, is light control. Jason,
Right.
I'm sure you know that, when setting up a projector, the room has to be dark. There can't be any lights on.
Yeah.
The surfaces, the walls have to be dark. There's all
The
these things
room's
you have to do with
everything.
the room's
Hmm.
everything. And I think we talked about before, if you could get the, the most expensive projector, most beautiful projector, incredible dynamic range, great
Mhm.
light, all of that stuff, and it will look like um, it will look
Do you,
bad. I was going to use
yeah.
an analogy that I won't go. It just will look bad in a room that's not correctly set up. Whereas a flat screen direct view display, whatever the technology is that's behind lighting up the pixels,
hmm
is just a lot easier to deal with, and also a lot easier to get a ton of brightness from.
Sure.
So I've also mentioned in a session before, for the record, I personally, this is completely subjective, like the rendered look of projected image on a flat, what's called Lambertian screen,
hmm
flat white diffusive screen. My eyeballs just take that more as reality or virtual reality, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
But at the same time, I understand the practicality limitations and the benefits of big flat screen displays. So the topic here is, okay, so we're going to work with a client. Maybe it's a giant, 100-inch, 100 and whatever is the largest displays. Now I'm kind of losing track. But
They're getting
what is the
big.
biggest single display you can buy these days?
So there are some like 98-inch panels out
Right,
there,
right,
lots of 85s now, 86s.
yeah,
And we've seen some progress by one manufacturer in particular who's aiming for like probably 110, 120 in the next couple of years.
right. So yeah, so the realm of 100 inches has been around for a little while. They've been
hmm
stupid expensive and big and heavy. It took a giant flatbed truck
Yeah.
to carry those things around. But that's all changing. And along with those changes come, of course, the fact that um, ultimately you're going to have to put the speakers somewhere. So
Right.
let's look into that. Course overview. We're gonna talk about some recommendations and guidance for where to put front channels and all the decisions that come with that.
hmm
We're gonna talk about what are those front channels for? The left, center, right. You'll often hear me say LCR. What I mean by that is left, center, right. We're gonna talk about the importance of the center channel, why it's around, why do we want to use it. And if you want to not use a center channel, but instead do what's called a phantom center, where two speakers are conveying the sound of the middle of what is that? It's called a phantom center. And what are some of the challenges behind that? Hold on one second. I'm repositioning microphones.
No, go ahead.
Still hear me okay?
Yep.
All good.
Sounds great. Yeah.
Hey, look at that. Today I don't actually have a headset. I have this device called a microphone. Um, and then we're going to talk about other options. There's a bunch of different things you can do. So let's see, quick reintroduction about me for those of you who are just logging in for the first time. I run 3 companies. Grimani Systems makes a whole new range of, I'm just going to call the new school speakers, new ways to
hmm
do theaters for home theaters, as well as two-channel audio and some commercial applications. I run a second company called PMI Engineering, which is a consulting and acoustics and engineering consulting company that designs listening rooms, studios, high-end home theaters, but even consults on kind of I would say midline media rooms. And then, just in my spare time, I also have a third group called Dimension 4. All this thing is actually run by different people. I just kind of oversee the thing.
Sure.
Is
Sure.
a group called Dimension 4 Acoustics that makes and sells acoustical materials for treating home cinemas, recording studios, churches, whatever you need.
Sure.
So I have a bachelor's of science in electrical engineering. I was lucky enough to spend 5 years at Dolby right out of college, an amazing opportunity right when surround sound was just a basic idea and was nascent, and I was in the group that was pushing that into the market.
That's so
Then I
cool.
spent, it was very cool. It was very cool. And then I spent 10 years I was hired by Lucasfilm to put together the home THX program, spent 10 years doing that. And then 21 years ago, I left that to start my own companies. So now I have the freedom to work all the time and play with the rest of it. So conclusions, I've had 35 years of fun working in this really, really interesting industry. I wouldn't trade it for anything else. Let's see, Custom Retailer Magazine named me one of the top 50 industry influencers, and CE Pro said I was quite a personality, the top 20. Um, the projects we've done have won many CEDIA awards. Pretty much every year there's something out there that gets an award for some of the projects we do for integrators. I've made the top CEDIA instructor, which means I got this little gold star. It's really cute. It's right over
That's
there.
really cool.
I, along the way, invented Surround EX, the format that was introduced with Phantom Menace as part of a way to start to increase the channel count from just 5.1 to 7.1, and now we're at, I lose track, 60.
Yeah.
I'm a CEDIA fellow and member of the Audio Engineering Society. I have 6 patents, 2 kids, guitar and saxophone and airplane, a funky old car called a 1937 Morris 8. I co-own a McLaren M8 replica
Nice.
race car with a guy called Russ Hershelman. Some of you guys may have heard that name. I have many bicycles and too many other toys. Now, with all of that, let's talk about what we want to talk about today. So I always go back to, you know, where do we start from in the beginning and all of that. So the reference when we're working with our clients and we're providing them high fidelity performance, the reference for home cinema is either the film mix room, which is a room like this that's like a small to mid-sized theater equipped with a bunch of speakers, and instead of a bunch of seats everywhere, there's a big recording console in the middle of the room. And this is where the sound designer, the director, the producer, anybody involved, the mixer involved in the sound of the movie is sitting and making decisions, adjusting sounds and going, yeah, I like the way that sounds. That's exactly what I wanted, or not quite there. Let's you know, adjust the tri-fuel gator a little bit more to the wear position. And that's not real.
I think you're making that up.
I am making that up. It's
the flux
official.
capacitor.
The flux capacitor. This right here is the flux capacitor of this room. This happens to be one of the mix rooms at Skywalker Sound. Beautiful space, wonderful setup for immersive audio. Another reference standard that's, you know, built often in the same buildings. Like in this case, this is the main screening room at Skywalker Sound. Is the main screening room. This is where you may do preview screenings. This is where the director may choose to go rather than the mix room. Both of these spaces, what's called the dubbing stage in technical speak in the film industry, and the mix rooms are built on documented standards.
Right.
One of them is the ISO 2969X document you can read, and it says this is what you got to do. And the other one is the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, standard number 202M. We can read that, and if you build a room that follows those standards, it will have a sound performance that matches the character of all of the other dubbing stages and screening rooms in the world. So this is just a question of being standardized so that you can actually hear it the way it was intended. So that's always the conversation in film sound is it was intended as heard in an environment like this, you should reproduce that. So in those rooms, in a mixing room, this is a view from the top of the room, you have 3 front speakers, known in that industry as the screen speakers. Left, center, and right, and they're called screen speakers because they're actually behind an acoustically transparent screen. So left, center, and right, and then you have an array of surrounds. So a left side, a right side, a back left, a back right, and then you have the immersive layers, which are speakers on the ceiling and extra speakers on the front. You have all of these channels playing in there, and there's a certain way that they're set up. There's a certain way that they're tuned, certain way that they're connected. And that way is, I would say, pretty standardized again. So whether you listen to a film soundtrack in a mix room at Skywalker Sound or somewhere else in the world, it's going to sound about the same. I'm sorry, I forgot there's also subwoofers, of course. We want some serious grunt. Now, a screening room, which, you know, could be exactly the same size, but instead of just a big recording console, they'd be a bunch of seats. Same thing, okay? Now, one of the peculiarities of this is there is a center speaker. So interestingly enough, in the film business, this is actually called stereo sound. The term stereophonic sound was not invented to mean 2 channels. That was actually a hijacking from the consumer industry. Stereophonic sound, as was coined by a guy called Alan Blumlein in the 30s, was a sound system that brought you back to the true stereotype of real life sound. And what Alan Bloomline found is that what it took across the front of your listening area is 3 speakers, a left, a center, and a right. And in his time, there was one effects channel in a horse shape wrapped around it.
Mhm.
The first big commercial expression of that was the movie Fantasound, as you sent me that
Ah,
that link. The
yes.
movie Fantasia, and they had developed a sound system for that that was incredibly expensive at the time, and Disney put a
Hmm.
ton of money, almost bankrupted the whole project. But that was a system that had 3 front channels, and the reason
Hmm.
for doing that is ultimately when you're watching a movie, you're listening to people talk. You're watching them generally in the middle of the screen, and by putting a speaker there, when they're talking, you hear them coming from that place, no matter where you are in this screening room, whether you sit right here in the middle or off
Hmm.
to the left or off to the right or front, wherever it is, as long as it's coming out of that speaker and it's a good speaker and it's well tuned and the acoustics are all good, the character of that dialogue is going to be clear and direct and always going to match the general position of actors and action in the middle of the screen. So that's how it's been done right from the beginning. So in the beginning
Right.
of Talkies, there was only one channel. It was the center channel. And then they
Hmm.
added some left and rights and they added effects over time. And now we have, tons and tons of channels, but the most important one is this one, the center channel. And that's
Yes.
because when for what do people do with those channels? Jason, you still hear me?
Yeah, you did cut out there for just a second, so maybe start that slide over, just in case.
All right. So just to re-summarize this, this is a typical layout of a screening room. The most important channel is the center channel, and this is not conveyed just out of 2 speakers like in the world of 2-channel audio. It's conveyed out of 3 speakers, a whole frontal sound stage. And the obvious reason for that is you want to hear the actors anchored in the middle of the screen. You want to hear the action that's in the middle of the screen anchored there. And by having a speaker there, you actually get to hear the sound at that location. So um, all of these channels you saw on the slide are used, could be used for anything, by the way. They're just channels, there's speakers, there's amps, and a mixer can put whatever he or she wants anywhere they want. Um, and then there's good taste. There's the things that work. It's just like in
Hmm.
cooking. You can, mix ketchup with dessert if you want. I don't know if ketchup and peaches works very well together, but nothing says you can't do that.
Right, sure.
If you run a restaurant and you serve peaches with ketchup, maybe patrons won't keep coming back, or maybe they'll love
Yeah.
it. I don't know. So let's look at what is the most common use for these channels. So the center channel, sometimes called the dialog channel, which is a big mistake. It's not the dialog channel. It's a center channel. It's
Right.
located in the center behind the screen. It carries what's fed there by the people making the soundtrack is all of the events centered on the screen, which is most often dialogue. But it could
Hmm.
also be sound effects, like if a car is crashing into a wall in the middle of the screen, guess where that sound's going to come from? The
Right.
center channel. If there's music focused in the middle of the area, it'll come from there. And anything that basically your eyeballs are seeing in the middle of the screen is going to be fed to that center channel because that's what makes sense. We're used to looking at things and hearing them from the same place. That's how it works. So center channel usually has dialogue. It's true, it's not a dialogue channel, but it usually has
Hmm.
dialogue. It's a full range channel with lots of dynamic range. And in fact, it has the highest acoustic energy of all the channels in this whole enchilada that I just showed there. Left and right speakers, they carry the events that are over to the sides of the screen, which could be dialogue once in a while. There's
Yeah.
mixers that actually pan dialogue a little this way, a little bit
Hmm.
that way, which has its own hazards we can talk about later if we have time. But most often it will be sound effects. So car crashes into a wall and bounces off into the to my left. I don't know which direction you're seeing this, but you're
Hmm.
right. The sound will actually be made to follow that sound, that action. It'll carry some music, it'll carry sound effects, it'll carry basically things that are spread wider on the screen. Um, and then there's the new wide channels in immersive audio. So those are the speakers that are basically from the middle side of the room forward and complement the soundstage. Those carry extensions of the sound field. So let's say you're making a
Hmm.
movie, there's a car starting in the middle of the action. You know, somebody's talking, they get in the car, the door slams, they start and they go, "Rrr," and they, you know, of
Yeah.
course they have to squeal their
Mhm.
tires because they're really pissed about what just happened. And they go off on, you know, to the right and then down behind you. Well, the mixer is just going to make the sound start in the center, go to the right
Mhm.
channel, pass the wide channels, which is an array of multiple speakers on the front right side of the room, into the side channels, and then maybe disappear into the back channel. So those wide channels help extend the sound stage of the screen, make the sound field of the screen be wider than just the
Mhm.
edges of the picture. And they also fill in the hole that has always been there between the screen action and the side channels
Right.
forever. It's just been known, you know, there's a gap there. Don't put too much sound over there because it's not going to be restituted correctly.
Mhm.
So that's what the wide channels are for. Then there's the sides and backs, the venerable sides and backs that have been there for years and years and years and years and years. And they usually have special effects. So
Mhm.
sounds of things panning around you, ambiances, so wind noise, reverb, echo,
Sure.
things that are, you know, supposed to wrap around the back of your sound field if you were there in real life. And then of course there's some music pan there, not a lot, but some stuff is put back there.
Right.
So that's what's in the side and back channels. And now we have these top speakers. What's up there? Well, you could certainly put a line of dialogue if you want in there. In Gravity, one of the early Atmos movies, you
Mhm.
know, there's dialogue sounds coming from all over there. Sometimes disturbing because you find yourself looking up at the
Yeah.
ceiling and go, I hear her, but I,
Yeah. Where's that coming from? Yeah.
um, but you know, more special effects, flyovers, things that want to go up and over,
Mhm.
and importantly, ambiances. The film mixers use that a lot to to essentially complement the whole bubble of sound, the three-dimensional sense that, yep, there's some action in front of me, there's some action here, action over here. It's raining, I hear it all the way around me. Um, and then finally, the subwoofers typically play loud sounds below 80 hertz. They're the
Mhm.
meat of the soundtrack, the things that make you go, you know, boom.
Yeah.
Um, now, to be clear, in movie theaters, the main speakers go down to 40 hertz.
Mhm.
Um, and then 40 hertz and below is handled by subwoofers. So 40 hertz is pretty low frequency, by the way. There's not
Yeah.
a lot of content below that. So,
Sure.
and they'll play pretty loud, but not super loud because a typical movie theater has, you know, a woofer cabinets that are about this tall, maybe dual 12, dual 15 inches. They
Mhm.
can't play the big boom crash that you would want to have in a high action movie. So film mixers put some bass into the front channel, some bass into the low frequency effects channel as it's known, to basically just have enough bass. In the home theater arena, we don't worry about that. We just cut everything off at 80 hertz, feed it to the subwoofers, which is the right way to do that. If you
Mhm.
want refresher on that, go look at the presentation called Subwoofers, How Many is Enough, right?
Yes. Yep.
Right here on this very YouTube channel. Now this is interesting. I'm gonna say if there's only one thing you remember from my blah blah today, and by the way, I'm gonna try to limit this to an hour today. We'll see if
We'll
we can.
see.
We'll
I'm
see.
sure. I'm sure there will not be anybody. I don't think anybody will be upset if we go a little over. It seems to be
Okay.
the common
Okay.
trend with our sessions, Anthony.
I'm continuously amazed that you guys stick with this for the length you do. So this is probably the most important slide. I know it seems kind of funny. This is actually a measurement done a few years ago now, to be fair, of the average sound content, not peak level, but the average energy in a 7-channel mix um, over the 2 hours of a movie, but about, I think we did 12 movies, if I remember right. So the
Hmm.
idea is like as if you had like a faucet that would open when they're center and you're filling in a jug. Okay,
Sure.
and then this is the average total energy. So if you take all those movies and present it this way, which is this is the center channel in green,
Hmm.
that's the left in blue, that's the right in red, and I tend to color code things like that because we're working in the world of RGB.
True.
Um,
Yeah.
the center on average has more energy, more
Hmm.
level, more needs more power than the left and rights by about 3 decibels, which is twice the power.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, 3 dB, it's interesting. 3 dB, and you turn the volume up 3 dB and the sound gets louder and you go, yeah, whatever. But that's actually twice the amount of power in an
Hmm.
amplifier to get that to happen.
Right.
And then the side left and right, typically about the same level from each other. And they're another 3 dB down. So the side channels over the whole course of a movie, and these are action movies, not just, you know, if you guys remember the movie My Dinner with Andre from many, many years ago with just people talking, but you know, just a good cross section of movies. The average power energy, whatever you want to think of it, of the side channels is 6 dB down, 1/4 the power. And then you go to the back channels, and it's another 3 dB down. It's 12 dB down on average. That's the total over energy. Now, if I were to put the tops and wides in here, they'd be like all the way down here. Forget it.
Right.
So, most important thing you got to realize is that the main channel is not the left and rights. I hear people call the mains. No, the left and rights are not mains. They're auxiliaries. The main channel is this guy, the center. That's where most of the action is. That's where you need to have clear dialogue. That's where the picture action is. That's where everything happens. And the left and rights are sort of like sidecars. They're sort of like a trimaran, you know, big hall in the middle and little side things. And then the other ones are just like little auxiliary embellishments, little doilies on the side of the whole action. And yeah, it's fun, but they're not as important. And this from a guy who's been pushing surround sound for, what is it, 35 years now.
Yeah.
I agree that while surrounds are really fun, it's really exciting, the main story is in that center. That's what's got to be played back perfectly first. So I took almost a half an hour to introduce this really important concept. Because I get into discussions with people all the time. It's like, well, you know, should the surrounds be here or there? Should they be at this low or this height? And what direction? It's like, whoa. Have you worried about your center channel? How's your center channel? I don't know. And then you look at a picture of the room that they're asking about, and there's a little puny speaker with a tweeter and 2 small 4-inch woofers under a screen in a room that's like 25 feet long. And I'm like,
yeah,
let's stop worrying about these. Let's
we
worry
need
about
to address that. Yeah.
Let's get that thing working right.
It's like in my world, when people are worried about resolution before they even think about black level, white level, you know, like let's take care of these important things first and then worry about the rest. Anthony, would you say it's fair to say if somebody's shopping for a speaker package and they're on kind of a limited budget, that they should concentrate the majority of the funds into that center channel? So in other words, if getting a nice big center channel means that your left and rights are now bookshelf speakers and not towers, is that a good trade-off?
It is, and nobody's ever going to do that, but that's the truth. If your focus is good quality home theater, put all your money into that center channel, get a really, really good one, because that's going to make an enormous difference. And place it in the right location, aim it correctly, equalize it, make that sound really good, and everything else will sound way better from that. And
excellent.
I have designed and installed systems like that, which kind of blows people away. It's like, whoa, what's that big center? And you got these little left and rights. It's like, trust me, it'll work.
It makes sense. Yeah, no, that's good. That makes total sense.
Okay, so the center channel dominates. Okay, not to get political, but the center channel dominates. It needs more sound pressure level headroom. It needs better dispersion and coverage. It needs smoother response than anything else in the room. You can't have a bass boost. There's a lot of, I'm going to say, hi-fi-ish speakers in which the designs take a liberty to put a little extra low frequency. Let's see, in your direction, that would be the bass over here, because it sounds warmer. Well, warmer is going to make the dialogue sound like this. That's wrong. That was me talking close into the mic and just getting all this.
And I've heard, and it's funny, but I've heard that before.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
And then there's speakers that inherently have a mid-range dip. There's like a little hole between 1 and 2 kilohertz, and either because of poor design or because they're, again, in one of the tricks of the trade in making a really good sounding speakers, you put a little dip there around that place, because it gets rid of the harshness of strings and horns, and things also sound smoother. Except that that's right in the middle of the dialogue clarity range.
That's where all that,
you put a dip over there, and they're like, I can hear them speak, I can hear there's dialogue, but I didn't quite get that line. And that line is usually something in the middle of action, in the middle. Let's say you have somebody that's yelling out an instruction in the middle of an action scene where like lots of music's going on, lots of boom crash, and you got to be able to resolve that. So this is a point at which I say that it is never a film director or a sound designer's intent for you to not understand a line of dialogue. I should
totally,
sorry. There are throwaway lines, things where you just want to hear that somebody went, whoo!
Yeah, sure.
But It is generally the intention that you hear dialogue clearly without having to strain, without having to like tilt forward in your seat, without
Yeah.
having to like look at the person next to you and say, what did he say? What was that? That's not the intention. And if you have a home theater like that, or if you're designing home theaters like that, or you've provided clients with home theaters like that, you got to stop, drop, and roll. You got to fix it.
Hmm.
And that's the next half hour. That's what we're going to talk about. So the answer to your question a second ago was no
Yeah.
small, low quality speakers allowed here.
There we
Sorry,
go.
we need something really good. So let's dig in. Let's look at what that means. By the way, I put your logo on here.
I know, it looks nice. I love the black
Yeah,
background too. It's wonderful.
there you go. And I have both.
Dark
I
mode.
have both a white and a black logo.
That looks awesome.
Fun with Photoshop. Okay, so let's talk about how do we place front speakers so they sound good? How do we place the center channel so that it has really clear dialogue and really good quality? How do we place the left and right so that their music is good? I'm going to do a very quick refresher of the session we did. Jason, maybe you can remind me several weeks ago on speaker
Mhm.
placement. So I'm actually going to go like super rapid on this because this is also going to be on YouTube. You can always like rewind and
Yeah,
listen again.
sure thing.
But I'm going to talk faster than you can ever note or follow.
Mhm.
So placement considerations for speakers. Number one, relationship to picture. They got to match where the picture is. Number
Always.
two, boundary reflections. So as you move speakers around a room, their interactions with the reflections in the room is going to change their sound. Number three, standing waves. There's resonances in the room, and sometimes by moving a speaker up or down or forward and back, you can change the interaction with the resonances and reduce the audibility. And of course, you want to put the speakers so that they match not only the picture, but also match your seated ear height. So you have right there, you have a compromise. Let's say your screen is up a little higher
Hmm.
to where putting them in the middle of the screen would put them 1.5 feet over your seated ear height. Do you put the speakers up there? And then when you sit back and listen to music, all the music's coming from up there. Well,
Sure.
you're going to be listening to music in this room, or your client's going to be listening to music in this room. You may need to compromise that height while
Hmm.
paying attention to boundary reflections and paying attention to standing waves. So uh, ultimately, this is like solving an equation with 5 different variables and trying to find the least screwed up solution.
Sure.
Okay, you can't make all of this work all perfectly. So this is the point where I say there are no perfect rooms.
Right.
The best rooms are the ones in which you understood all the compromises the best possible,
Hmm.
and you made decisions like all life is. There's no clear decisions in life. It's always like, should I stay or should I go? Should I
Yeah.
cave or should I grow? And well, there's compromises at both of those. And intelligently, you got to choose like these 5 points over here. You got to choose the best choices for those. Okay, so more on this. So position of speaker does affect their sound, and you want to find the best position through computer modeling. There's some very good
Hmm.
computer modeling tools that you build basically a simulated 3D version of your room, and you put the speaker around, and you can see how the responses are going to change. Or if the speakers are already in the room, or I should say, and when the speaker's in the room, you can also measure it with an analyzer. So you can put the speaker at different positions and look at the frequency response and the errors and the bass and the mid-range as you change it around using an analyzer and a decent microphone. Jason, do you still have your microphone behind you
Yeah,
there?
I sure do. Got my little Dayton microphone all right here.
Right. So
Hmm.
that's a $80.
Yeah, $79. You got it.
79. Okay. So $79 will buy you today what you used to have to spend thousands of dollars for
Sure.
a good quality analysis microphone. So that microphone with a computer program called Room EQ Wizard running on your
Hmm.
computer and a little bit of time to go through the tutorials and boom, you got yourself a great analyzer. I don't want to hear any of this like, I can't afford to have one. Yeah, I have my cell phone. No.
No,
Go
no, yeah.
go spend the $80
Yeah,
on
no
the
excuse today. Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
It's the proper tool for the job. It's not expensive. Just do it.
Right. So you're going to find the best position through computer modeling, measuring in room, and through listening. Well, what if you're doing a dedicated theater like most of us are doing, and you really
Hmm.
don't have a choice to change the speakers in the room after they're in there? The speakers are going here, end of story.
Sure.
Well, uh, you left with computer modeling, some thinking, some like considering, and that's what you got to do. So remember to aim the speakers towards the listening area. I often see front speakers that are, flushing a wall or, not aiming correctly. Remember, they all have
Right.
some amount of directivity.
Sure.
Ours have less directivity. We did a design using these waveguides that helps with that, but you got to make sure that they're aimed in the right direction. So as a quick refresher of that session several weeks ago, this is the overall layout of rooms. And I know this diagram has a ton of lines, but generally the left and right speakers want to form a 45-degree angle from your head. So this is a view from above of a room. Left to right is, the target is 45 degrees. That's what they hear in the dubbing stage in a screening room for the spread between the left and rights, and you want to try to replicate that. You want to place theirs, again, for the best interaction with the room acoustical character. So measure and analyze. And you want the center speaker to be at the same height as the left and right speakers, because that's how it is in a dubbing stage. And then there's these other things about the sides, wides, and backs, and that's not our topic today. Now, let's talk about this placement horizontally. So this is our room seen from the top. This is either us with our receding hairline or our client with their receding hairline. And this is our left and right speakers. I'm starting off with the position of the left and right speakers in this slide. They, again, want to form a 45-degree angle to your seated position, which if you don't want to do trigonometry or like measure angles on a CAD drawing, by the way, that also happens to be 0.83 of the distance between you and this plane. So if you want to make it easy on yourself, if you're 10 feet away from that screen, that distance is 8.3
8 feet. Yep.
Okay. If you're 20 feet away from those, what's the distance?
Half of that.
If you're 20 feet away from the speaker.
Oh, double. Sorry.
Yeah. Jason,
I was backwards. I don't drink coffee, and now you're starting to see that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So now what's interesting with that position of the left and right is some speakers are going to produce a good phantom image and some speakers are not. And so what are you drinking there? Is that scotch this early in the morning?
No, just water. Just
water.
Just Monday morning, it's water.
Just checking. So some speakers are really good at what people call throwing a really good image, and some speakers are not. And there's a whole bunch to the reasons of why and how all of that. But in some point, the position of those speakers, as you get them wider than 45 degrees, can actually start to lose the phantom center, the imaging between them. And you could go, well, who cares? There's a center speaker there. It's like, well, not always. There's a bunch of things in film mixes in which the mixer intentionally spread things across the frontal soundstage between the left and right speakers. And there's reasons for doing that. A lot of times music is smeared across between the left and right speakers with a little bit in the center, but not all in the center. So you want to maintain a good phantom center. And then you also want to listen to music once in a while. Music is still fun. Remember that, And
of course,
so as you spread those speakers past 45, 50, 60 degrees, sometimes you can end up with a giant hole in the middle. So the other thing in positioning those speakers, again, this is going back to that session a few weeks ago, you want to try to place them so that they're not driving a standing wave, and you want to place them so that there's not big boundary effects. So what is this business of boundary effects? Reflection issues are called boundary effects when it comes to speakers and how they interact. And those reflections can cause dips and peaks in frequency response, usually in the lower frequency. So those peaks and dips depend on the speaker location and the relationship to the walls, the floor, the ceiling. And each speaker can have different boundary interactions. Now, you could say, well, I'm going to get rid of any problems with that by using absorption. Now, water.
There you go. Stay hydrated. Got to do a gallon a day.
And so it is hard to absorb those issues. If you have problems around 100 hertz or 150 hertz because of boundary conditions, you'd have to have really thick absorbers to get rid of that. So while I make and sell acoustical treatments, I'm going to say that's not always the best mitigation solution. I'd love to sell you stuff for that, but let's be real, it's thick. So the peaks and dips look like this. So if you had a reference performance of a speaker in green over here, and then you add a surface off which it's bouncing, you could end up with a frequency response that looks like this, which is there's peaks and dips and errors. And you can't always get rid of that through treatments. You can get rid of a little bit of it, but not all of it. And you can't get rid of it through equalization because those peaks and dips all depend on where you're measuring and where you're sitting.
Sure.
So here's a prediction of boundary effects from a speaker off a boundary in 2-inch increments as you move it further and closer to a wall. I've explained all this in the other session, but there are tools where you can actually see, you know, by placing the speaker here or there, you end up with peaks and dips here and there.
Right.
And ultimately the goal, so you can't get rid of this.
Mm-hmm.
You can move the speaker around, and as you see here, as you move the speaker in 2-inch increments, it changes frequency errors quite substantially from a really deep dip to that. But this is a reflection off actually a few different boundaries in this particular program. So this is cool. You can actually put several, but you
Oh,
can see
nice.
here what's going to happen off the 3 surfaces. The goal is to have the smoothest frequency response, the least amount of errors. And the second goal is to make sure the left and right sound about the same and the center sounds about the same of that. Ultimately, for the center speaker, the goal is dialogue clarity. So if you have
Mm-hmm.
really big peak and errors, peak and dip errors, the dialogue's just not going to be clear. So you can, so step 1 is to place the speakers correctly. Remember that resistive absorbers are too thick. You can try using Helmholtz or diaphragm methods, and you can try to equalize. Ultimately, generally for placement, especially of the front speakers, but probably all of them, you want a combination of a placement in the room that has the least amount of frequency response errors. You want some amount of low frequency control around the speakers, and you want to equalize the remainder. Okay, if you can do those 3 things, place the speaker correctly, do some treatment, and equalize, you end up with things that don't sound as bad.
Anthony, real quick, there's two questions about towing the speakers in. And I know going back to a couple slides ago, you always say aim the speakers at the listener. One question from John, he's just asking if they should be towed in. I think you're going to say always aim them at the listener. And Samir says if you're going to tow in the left and right speakers, are you towing those in intuitively, or is it kind of based off of speaker dispersion, or are you just aiming the tweeters at the listener's face?
Yeah, those are both good questions, and actually ultimately don't have a lot of effect on the low frequency boundary effects. As you turn a speaker, tow it in or out, the low frequency is still spherically radiating in the room. So this effect I'm showing over here, which is a bounce off this surface that's arriving later than the direct sound, and another bounce off the front surface, that's all low frequency. That's all stuff below 200 hertz, and
Right.
the tow-in's not going to change that. What the tow-in will change, and that has a lot of importance, and I'm going to get to that, is the fact that the mids and highs are all lighting up the seating area correctly. It's not intuitive. It's really easy to do, though. Play pink noise in the left speaker and go sit in the middle.
Right.
Move all the way to the right and make sure you're not falling off the mid-range or high frequency. Move to the left, move to the right, and trying to maintain your head at the same height.
Sure.
Which I do by actually doing a Groucho Marx imitation and walking
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean, it
hunched
works.
over.
Yeah,
And,
it
and
works.
aim the speaker to where from the left side of the room to the right side of the room, everybody is in the sound field.
It
It's
all sounds
not
about the
much more
same.
complicated than that. And what you'll
Sure.
find in most theaters, given the typical array of seats, unless you have only one seat in the middle, but by the time you have 3 or 4 or 5 seats, most speakers are barely, because of their natural dispersion in the mids and highs, are barely gonna make it from the left side to the right side.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah, great questions, guys. If you want some follow-up on that, feel free to type away.
So what you're aiming for in placing these speakers is there's going to be a direct sound, there's going to be a reflection off the wall, another reflection off the front wall, a reflection off the floor, reflection off the ceiling, reflection from the back. And ultimately what you're trying to avoid is this path length that's interfering with the direct sound because it's arriving later and causing peaks and dips at a certain range of frequency. You're trying to avoid that extra path length from being the same as that. Because
Right.
if they are the same, those errors are compounded. So this diagram tries to show that if you had a reflection off the side wall that caused a first dip at, I don't know, random number, 95 hertz,
Sure.
you would not want the floor reflection to also be at 95 hertz, and you would not want the front wall reflection to be at 95 hertz. You want to move the speaker to where you're not getting rid of the peaks and dips, but you're spreading them out over the frequency range so that you have 3 smaller dips rather than one big triple whammy.
Right.
And that's what, when audiophiles are moving speakers around and listening to them and listening to the sound quality and the imaging and all that, that's actually one of the things that's happening, is changing the interactions between the boundaries. So on the vertical plane, same issues happen. There's boundaries off the ceiling and floor, and
Right.
you want to watch out for those. But generally, you want the left and right and center speakers to be at the mid height of the screen. And at the same time, you want them at CDD height. So that can be a contradiction, like I said earlier. And if the speakers are not going to be the same height, and I'm about to go into that, you don't want such a big difference in their angle, like where they're coming from. You don't want it so big so that you actually hear that the center is here and the left and right is somewhere else, because that's just disturbing in the middle of a movie. So remember to eliminate a standing wave. Remember to reduce reflections and boundary effects. So with all that in mind, the ideal location for the 3 front speakers in a good quality theater is to put the left, center, and right speakers behind an acoustically transparent screen. Use the same speaker. Don't use a small horizontal puny center and some really big ballsy left and right. So it should be 3 identical speakers for the same reason that you would not use a left and right speaker that are different from each other. The center should be the same as a left and right. And you place them behind an acoustically transparent screen, and you do analysis to figure out where the height should be, where the positions should be relative to boundaries, yada, 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 everything I just said. Okay, that's what you got to do.
Sure.
Done.
Standard operating procedure. I've seen this for years.
SOP. That's what you do. And
you
know, I guess I'll say I'm glad to see that there's more and more and more AT screens, like they're called, acoustically transparent screens out there. A lot of different manufacturers have jumped on that. There's some really good ones that are essentially just like Grow Cloth for sound, and that for picture are completely Lambertian, truly white surface, no errors in spectrum. So that is out there. But what if you got one of those clients that has a really bright room, or is it really enamored with a big screen TV, wants to watch in full daylight, likes it really bright? This just doesn't work.
You can't do this.
You can't.
Or I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I've seen some cases too where they buy these really high-end beautiful speakers and they don't want to hide them, and I kind of get that too.
Yeah, that's another reason. So we've done rooms, actually some CD award-winning rooms, in which the room is what I call a playroom. The lights are generally on, there's windows, and you can sort of do this by using a high gain screen, a dark matrix high gain screen. There's a bunch of manufacturers that make those. They generally are micro perforated vinyl, so they do have some picture and sound degradation, but you can get away with it. But you know, there's cool new stuff happening, and let's change the conversation from this ideal. I'm pointing at the screen. At this ideal, can you see my mouse moving around here?
Yeah, it looks good. Yep.
To the reality that, hey, it was actually conflicted what to call this. Is this called a solid screen? Is it a fixed pixel display? What,
That's
know,
a
what
good
is
point.
it?
Yeah, what do we call it? Yeah.
What do you like to call it? You know, a big 98-inch thing that fits on a wall.
Yeah, I just keep calling them big flat panels at this point. Haven't come up with a cool new name yet.
I was at a client's place the other day, and they called it a big plasma screen. It's like,
oh yeah, it's like that episode of The Office where Michael gets the plasma screen. Yeah.
I remember that. It's like, what do you contradict them? It's like, well, no, it's an OLED, but no.
Yeah, actually, sir, you know, Penrod comes out. Hey guys, what it actually means is.
It's all right. It's fine. So, with everything I just said, now let's just change out of the acoustically transparent ideal, and let's go to a big solid screen. Now what do we do? Well, we can't put the speakers behind the screen because right?
That won't work.
So what do we do? Well, we're going to put the left and rights to the left and right side of the screen, right? And unless the screen's 140 inches wide, that won't push them too far out past 45 degrees. In fact, it may be a little bit narrow, so you may want to move them out a little bit more. And then what do we do with the center? We're going to put it below the screen. So that may work, except that if it's below the screen and you want less than 10 degrees of height difference so it's not jarring, now you have to bring the left and right speakers down, which is okay. Just make sure that this is not typically much more than 2 feet, 60 centimeters of height, or if you actually know how to do the trigonometry, 10 degrees. Now, what if you're using some good speakers, like mid-sized speakers, trying to get to the camera, that are about this tall, you know, they've got maybe, you know, a woofer, mid-range, and a tweeter, and you want to put that thing below the screen and there's no room.
Yeah, because maybe the screen is big, or maybe there's a fireplace. Yeah, maybe it's close to the floor. Yeah, excellent point.
Or maybe the screen is really big. I did a project with a big, one of the larger Samsung LED arrays, and
Sure.
you know, there was this much room below between the bottom of the screen and the floor, so you can't put the speaker there. So if the speaker is very close to the floor, by the way, there is going to be a strong floor reflection. And I don't know if you
Yes.
can hear that this has changed the sound of my
Oh,
voice.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
this is just a hand. So that's what's
Hmm.
going to happen to your speaker. It's going to have a low frequency, low and mid frequency error, and the dialogue clarity is going to go down.
Right.
If you have a 2-row theater, the front row is going to hear that speaker okay, even though its sound is coming from a different place than the screen. So they're looking up at people on the screen, and their sound of their voices is coming from down there. That's a little jarring. It's a little like,
Sure.
it doesn't quite match inside the brain.
Right.
You get over it. But the people behind you are not hearing that speaker because it's blocked. This is called a spade, and now a bad sounding speaker. So
Right.
some people, because there's no room or because they bought a horizontal center speaker, do this. They put the speaker under the screen,
Hmm.
um, and you know, all the same problems I just mentioned happen. But be careful. What about the coverage of that speaker? So
Well, yeah, exactly. I was about to say, I mean, what if that speaker has a horn versus a traditional tweeter? That could totally make a major difference.
and much worse than that, if that speaker is built like the great majority of horizontal center speakers, you got big problems. It's horizontal and it's screwed up. So let me talk
Right.
about this. So whenever you're looking at a speaker that's made as a horizontal center speaker, where you see 2 woofers and a tweeter, be really careful. Here's the deal. I've talked about this before in one of the other sessions. Um,
Hmm.
the One of the goals of a home theater is that the dialogue be clear, that you hear it
Right.
clearly coming from the middle of the screen. Now it's not even doing that; it's below the screen. And the other goal is that you hear the sound right, and that your sweetie hears the sound right also. Or
Hmm.
if you sit off axis because you like to kind of slump, that you hear the dialogue clearly, and that
Totally.
your partner also hears the dialogue clearly. And if there's a problem with that, you can get into big issues. So let's look at that. So beware of traditional center speakers. This is a traditional center speaker I put on the screen. What happens with those is that these displaced woofers
Hmm.
over some range of frequencies, usually between 1 and 3 kilohertz, will have a coverage pattern that looks like this clover, this 5-leaf clover. This is called a lobing pattern. They'll project sound straight in front of them, then there'll be a gap. There'll actually be an interaction hole pointing right at that seat,
Oh, sure.
and then it'll come back, and then there'll be a hole pointing at the wall. And so the person who's sitting here is hearing all the sound correctly.
Hmm.
By the way, this is not what you're seeing here is not over the whole range of frequencies. It's over about an octave only, but
Got it.
usually around right in the dialogue clarity octave, right where the sound, the clarity of
Where,
voice is.
where all the important stuff is.
Important stuff is. So let's say you sit over here,
Hmm.
and let's say that you're in a theater and your life partner is a woman, and you're sitting over here listening to dialogue with the mid-range whole, because the sound, what this means is that the sound level right here is 6, 7, 8 dB quieter than
Hmm.
straight on. So
Sure.
what do? You grab the volume control and you turn it up until you hear the voices correctly.
Right.
And then now what is she doing? What is
Turn
she
it
hearing?
down. My
Turn it
ears are
down.
bleeding.
So women have more sensitive hearing than we do. They have better hearing than
Absolutely.
we do. I have
Absolutely.
confirmed this 100 different times.
Hmm.
So not only do they have better hearing, but also in the mid-range, they have better hearing. And now you've cranked it up 6 dB so that you can understand what's going on. And she's like, I'm out of here, man.
Hmm.
I'm going to go do something different than watch this
Sure.
movie with you. It's like, oh,
I wonder why.
oh, pout. Um, And that's, I'm saying you, but what if your client's doing that? Now your client's unhappy. Now they're fighting over the remote control. Somebody's grabbing it, and then
Right.
now they're yelling at each other.
Hmm.
This happens all the time. So don't do this. So
Yeah.
if you have a big screen TV and you're inclined to put one of those traditional horizontal center speakers under the big screen TV, don't do it. So then what do? Um, if you are going to need to do this, where you have to have a form factor that's kind of narrower like this, go for a 3-way speaker. So, yep, they cost more. You're going to have to convince your client they're going to have to spend more money, but the better manufacturers make speakers where there's 2 woofers, a mid-range, and a tweeter.
Sure.
And by doing that, the 2 woofers are actually playing up typically up to 300 or 400 hertz, maybe 500 hertz. And right where there would start to be interactions that cause these lobing patterns, these clover shapes, they've crossed over to the mid-range, which is firing straight, nice and even, nice and round pattern. And then that mid-range crosses over to a tweeter at 2.5 or 3 kilohertz, and you don't have any of this mess.
Sure.
So by the way, the proper pattern would actually be a nice even lobe that instead of having these peaks and dips goes all the way around this, right? So if you looked at that same speaker at 6 kilohertz, actually at 6 kilohertz, it may be something like this. I have another presentation where I show all of these polar patterns. I didn't have time over here. Okay, so if you have to do this, if you've got a big screen display and there's very little room below the screen, go look around the catalog of the different vendors and go for a 3-way speaker, or go for this thing called a 2.5 way. So we know what a 2-way speaker is. It's one that has woofers and tweeters.
Sure.
3 ways, one that has woofer, mid-range, and tweeter. What's a 2.5 way? It's neither of the above.
Yeah, none of the above, yeah.
So the design of a 2.5 way is more expensive. They cost more. They have slightly lower sensitivity, but it's the idea that the 2 big round things, the 2 woofers play together at low frequency. And as of about 400 or 500 hertz, one drops off and the other woofer becomes a woofer mid-range. So it continues on up and then hands over to the tweeter that's in the middle. So that's called a 2.5 way. It's that way because it's really only 2 ways, but it's somewhere between a 2 and 3 way speaker. And
what's making the magic happen there? Is it the crossover network? Is it what's going on there? Crossover.
Yeah, so in the crossover network, you have a lot more parts that actually, rather than play the 2 woofers together typically in parallel and just have one crossover for the low frequency from your direction for the low frequency and one crossover for the tweeter, you have one crossover for the low frequency only woofer, and another one that carries the other one up further, and then the tweeter takes over from there. So I posted something on my Facebook page recently of a new speaker we just launched called the Rixos L, which is a pretty good size.
I did see that. Congrats. That looks really cool.
It's a bigger version of what's behind me. And on that one, because it's big enough and it's got 8-inch drivers, we actually make that as a 2.5 way speaker. So
got it.
2 8-inches work together at low frequency to get plenty of headroom. Those 2 woofers made by Fatal together will do about 98 dB of sensitivity, which is pretty damn insane.
Yeah, that's great.
And then as of somewhere around 400 hertz, one of the woofers drops off. The bottom woofer drops off, and then the upper woofer continues on up and crosses over to the waveguide loaded tweeter at 1.2 kilohertz. So there's no, that in that case was about vertical dispersion to make sure there's no accidents in the radiation.
Excellent. That's
very
awesome.
important. So I talked somewhat in sessions about dispersion and radiation and how important that whole thing is. The session when I talk about picking good speakers, I'm going to spend an hour and a half talking just about that, because that ultimately is the one of the most important things, if not the most.
Samir had asked, and this probably is something you're going to touch on in that session anyway, but Samir had asked, what is your feeling about coaxial speakers?
That's a good question. So the idea of a coaxial speaker is to put the tweeter right at the same place as the woofer, or the tweeter at the same place as the mid-range, wherever the thing. And then you don't have any of these off-axis lobing issues that come from what happens at the transition point between the two. So it's a very good way to do it. They do have implementation challenges, because now you're putting the tweeter at the bottom of the horn, and if the horn's not well designed, because the horn happens to be a woofer, you have these frequency response errors. I'll give good credit where credit is due. The guys at KEF have been working on that for, wow, I forget when the UniQ came out. Let's say 35 years of messing around with that.
Oh, wow.
Their current crop of UniQ or whatever, their tweeter in the middle of a speaker, are unbelievably good. And they're unbelievably good for the money. So KEF does make some relatively small compact speakers, self-powered, thing about this big that doesn't cost a lot, that has a concentric tweeter that just sound awesome. Very, very good work, guys. Okay, so Then there's people who are tempted to do this. Okay, I'm going to put a center speaker below and one above, and then I'll get a phantom image between the two. It'll replace that speaker that was supposed to be here. Does this work? Okay,
This
spoiler alert, it
seems
says
like
it,
there's some red flags here already, just looking
right.
at it.
So follow me here. The reason you get a phantom image between a left and right speaker is simply that your ears are bolted onto your head over
Yeah,
here.
they're not like
You
this.
hear, correct. You hear that sound there, and it creates a phantom over here. And I'm about to get into the whole business of phantom images. Those two speakers vertically are not going to generate a phantom here until you turn your head like this. So if you've got a theater in which people are reclining and sitting like this, yeah, that could work. But that just doesn't do it. It is true that it will lift the image up from being here.
Hmm.
But now you've got these two speakers that are competing with each other that unless they're perfectly time aligned and your head
Yeah.
is like at exactly the right location, one's arriving slightly before the other and you end up with comb filter interactions.
Hmm.
And that leads to kind of a fuzzy dialogue. So let's talk about dialogue again. Um, the film mixer or the director in a screening room is hearing a very good speaker, very well tuned, with the right directionality, the right, actually constant directivity in rooms with good acoustics, and they're hearing a really crisp, clear dialogue, like the
Sure.
type you get out over headphones or the type you get in the near field out of speakers. It's just really clear. It's every articulation is there, and that's what you want to get.
Hmm.
Anything you do to make it more fuzzy, which is to put two of them that end up with comb filters, where these interactions, rather than have a really smooth response, you end up with these peaks and dips, gets away from dialogue clarity, which means that there will be a line in a movie that you go, what?
Yeah.
Get
Well,
that.
and that all being set aside, even if I'm doing two 8 ohm center channel speakers and I'm dealing with an 8 ohm amplifier, then I'm gonna have to do something really weird to make it wired correctly, right?
Maybe, most amps are going to, there's the long and the short part of that.
I could do two
Uh,
4 ohm center channels, wire them in series, but
you could do two 4 ohms wired in series, and most amps, if you throw two 8 ohm speakers to them in parallel, it will be fine.
yeah,
Except that when somebody says a speaker is 4 ohms, um, that's the average.
the
There could be
average,
a
yeah,
dip. There could be a
sure,
dip at one frequency that goes down to 3 ohms.
sure.
The rule is if you say 8 ohms, the dip is never supposed to be more than down to 20% from the stated
Hmm.
value, which is 6.4 ohms. And a lot of manufacturers cheat that. So
Got it.
I've seen speakers that are, labeled 8 ohm that when you actually measure the impedance versus frequency, there's a range where they go down to 4 ohms, and you put those two in
Woo!
parallel. Now you have a range that goes down to 2 ohms, and now
Something
the
hits
amplifier.
two and the amp fries. Yep.
Well, so good news is very few amps will fry today from that because
Yeah.
they've got really good protection. Most
Protection
most
mode. Yep.
engineers are really good. But what's going to happen is right in the middle of a good loud scene, the amplifier is going to go click,
Clip. Yep.
and it's shut off. So you're like,
Most important
well, what
part of
just
the
happened?
movie.
Yeah.
He's about to say something really important and then gone.
Well, and that will usually happen when your client has their buddies over and they've
Oh, of
cranked it up
course.
a little bit to impress them, and right when it's like, "Wah!"
Yeah.
Quiet.
Nothing.
And by the way, because the overall let's say it was a big receiver and you have your video running through it and the receiver went into protection, the picture just went away, the sound went away,
Oh, the whole
everything
system.
stopped.
Full system
Now
failure. Yep.
now your client's looking like an idiot.
Totally. We don't want
You
that.
just lost a lot of points. You just lost
Yeah.
a lot of referrals. So don't do that. Okay. So um, let's go back. I've labeled these as options. You got a big solid screen, flat
Hmm.
screen display. Option one, put a center speaker the way it's supposed to be if it is a three-way speaker or a two-way diapolier with two woofers and a tweeter in the middle. Option one is you do this. If you don't have room, you could just do this with as an option two, but make
Hmm.
sure your horizontal center speaker doesn't have this horrible off-axis
Right.
response. Okay, and the way to make sure of that is to pick a three-way speaker or a 2.5-way. If you're not sure from looking at the design, call the manufacturer and go, is this a two
They
and a
should
half
know.
way speaker? And they should know. Option three is to do this, not a good option. Okay,
Right.
big X, don't do it, ixnay. Option four is, well, what about a phantom center? What happens if I just put a good pair of left and right speakers to either side of the screen, no center? How well does that work? Well, The fact is, it'll work better than a really crappy center speaker with poor off-axis radiation. So this is not ideal. And it's not ideal. I'm going to give you a litany of stories. See, there it is. I broke the 1 hour again.
Yeah.
And this was like much less slides than I've ever put in here. Anyway,
Hey, it's okay.
you guys are okay sticking with me for another 15, 20?
I'm sure they are. I'm sure nobody would object to that at all. But guys, feel free. Yeah, everybody's
Just
fine. Yeah,
remember,
the
if you have to go
comments are
about
coming
your
in.
business, remember this is
Yeah, we're
being recorded.
recording.
And
Right.
so you can always come back and watch the end of this later. So it is better to do a phantom center than a really crappy hard center. And I've told
Right.
people a lot, and I've been in rooms where the small bad center speaker, good left and rights on either side of a fixed pixel display. Center speaker, one of those two ways with off-axis radiation that sucked. I just went right into the decoder and said no center speaker.
No center. Yep.
And the integrator's looking at me like, "What are you doing, man? You gotta listen to this. It's a lot better." Oh yeah, it is. So now there's a lot of caveats, lots of warnings. So let's go into that. Let's look at the effects of a hard center, a real center versus a phantom center, so you understand the differences. First of all, what do you get out of a hard center, an actual real speaker? This is a 7-channel room seen from above with our client with the receding hairline. And the center sound is going to go from the speaker to your head. It's hitting your nose, but that's not where you hear. It's actually hitting your 2 ears. I put 2 vectors over here, and it's hitting both ears together with no shadowing from your head. It's going, directly to your outer ear. The sound's getting shoved into the ear canal. It's clear. As long as you have a good speaker and that the boundary conditions are good and you've equalized it, all of those things I talked about before. Okay, if the acoustics are good and the electroacoustics are good, it's going to be a clear center channel. Now, if you look at this from a point of view of frequency response, and it's a decent speaker and it's correctly equalized, the sound level versus frequency will look something like this, a nice, smooth, continuous line. In reality, it should be tilted down and have this target curve, but I'm just simplifying this down for us. Now, if you put that same sound, that same energy that's supposed to come out of an actual center speaker that's supposed to go to your head and hit your 2 ears just like a person speaking in front of you, if you put it out of the 2 speakers, the phantom center has a head shadowing. So the sound coming from the left speaker is hitting your left ear correctly. It's my left, so you're right. So it hits your ear correctly, but then it has to wrap around your head to hit the other one, and there's some shadowing effect from that. And the one from the right channel hits your right ear and then wraps around to your head to hit the left ear, and there's some interaction and shadowing effects from that. The 2 ears do get a sound that is correlated. So in psychoacoustics, that's called a sound with a high ICC, interoral cross correlation, which tells you that the sound is in front of you, but there is a resulting frequency response dip. So in green was the ideal frequency response you're getting from a good speaker properly tuned. In red is what you're going to get from a left and right speaker properly tuned, where if you measured each one of them individually, it would be flat. What you're going to perceive is this. There'll be a dip in the middle that comes from the interaction between the 2 ears and the delay and the price of gas in Lithuania when it's really too expensive.
And it's right in the middle too. Oof.
Right in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
So I love to show this to people is you play a center speaker and then you have the same speakers in left and right and you've equalized them so that pink noise sounds exactly the same across all 3. And you listen to a line of dialogue in a movie, especially one that's a little bit challenging, and you go from hard center to phantom center just by telling the surround decoder, I got a center, I don't got a center. And you notice that the center just it's there, but it just gets a little, it's soft, it's fuzzy, it's less clear.
Sure.
Okay. So what do we do? Well, you can apply some compensation EQ, which is you can put a little boost in the mid-range to compensate for that interoral dip. There are several papers in the literature, like they like to say in science, that document exactly what that is. I believe in Floyd Toole's book, he's got a chart that shows what that is, but it's basically around 3-4 dB centered around 1.5 kilohertz. You boost that back up and suddenly the dialogue sounds clear again. Okay, so that, what I just described here is applies when you're right in the middle of the room at the same
Mm-hmm.
distance between the left and right speakers at the tip of this pyramid, all good. But then what happens when you go off axis, right? When you're not in the middle anymore, when you move one seat to the right, what happens? Well, the center still hits your two ears together. You know, it's correlated, it's clear, it's crisp, all of that. And so you get a good frequency response out of that. But the left and rights still have the
Oof.
shadowing effect. And on top of that, this path is
Mm-hmm.
shorter than this path
Mm-hmm.
by about this much. So this speaker is further away by about this much. And what does that mean? That means that at some frequencies, the waves that hit you are going to be out of phase with each other. At
Mm-hmm.
some other frequencies, they're going to be in phase with each other, and they're going to be rotating around as you go from low frequency, where they're going to be correlated, through the mid range and on up. And what you're going to hear is a combination of a dip plus some irregularity in the frequency response called comb filtering.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called comb filtering because if you look at it in high resolution, it looks like the teeth of a comb, all the dips do.
Got it.
So that's even less clear. And because you moved off axis and that speaker is closer to you and the sound arrives at you
Yeah, you're
first,
imaging.
the center has moved to the right.
Right.
So phantom center can actually be made to sound pretty damn good with decent speakers. I'll talk about what I mean by that in a second, as long as you sit right in the middle.
Sure.
And then you move, well, on my headphone wires, you
Mm-hmm.
move this way, the center moves with you, and things get fuzzy and the dialogue doesn't appear clear.
Yeah.
Music still sounds okay. But if you actually listen to dialogue on its own, you'll notice it gets a little fuzzy. And you listen to dialogue in the middle of a movie, and there's lines of dialogue you're just not getting.
Is it safe to compare this to like watching an LCD panel off axis?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
lower end panels, they get pretty ugly off axis,
That's what it
right?
sounds to me. I mean, you're
Yeah,
looking at an LCD straight on, the black levels are good. You do this, now your blacks are gray and your colors are
right,
desaturated. Same
right.
kind of thing. That's interesting.
Same thing. Yeah, you lose that definition. So if you said, well, I'm just going to apply the compensation EQ. Well, the compensation EQ will correct for that interaural dip, but it won't fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
It won't fix the fact that the sound has moved over in one direction. And it won't fix the fact that there's comb filtering, because you can't fix those really narrow dips. Besides, you're going to fix it for one position. You move your head another 6 inches, it's going to be a different set of peaks and dips. So I'm speaking about something that's completely basic, mundane, simple, but a lot of people don't really pay attention to. So
Mm-hmm.
what do we do? I'm not going to throw away the phantom center option quite yet. And you'll see that there's a way to make that work. So how to make it work? You've seen this diagram about 1,000 times in my
Oh yeah.
presentation. And that's the reality, that while in these pictures I show one vector of sound going to, to your head, makes it sound
Mm-hmm.
like the speakers are just shooting out arrows at you. The reality is they don't do that. The reality is there's a direct sound that goes from the speaker to your head, and then there's all these reflected sounds bouncing around all over the
Mm-hmm.
place. So there's, in this diagram, the direct sound is in green. In all of the red arrows are reflections from the speaker. Now, the fact is that those peaks and dips in the comb filtering can get filled in by the reflection energy in the room. So if you were in a room with very directional speakers and the room is very treated, very anechoic, you're going to hear what I just described over there like crazy. You move your head a little bit and the
Yep.
sound image moves, and you hear all these comb filters. It sounds like
Mm-hmm.
move around if you listen to pink noise. But if you actually use speakers with very even and wide horizontal dispersion, like those little casts I just mentioned, where the off-axis sound is almost absolutely identical to the direct sound. They're not
Mm-hmm.
super wide dispersion, but what goes and bounces around the room is a really even replica, or our speakers that are designed exactly for that. That's like our big stock and trade, is to use these waveguides to spread the sound. Or many other speakers that have a really good horizontal dispersion from lots of manufacturers. Then what's bouncing around the room is a good replica of the direct sound, and it tends to fill in those peaks and dips and gives you the impression that the sound hasn't moved as much. So if you're going to use a phantom center solution, make sure you have a decent range of acoustical reflections in the room, maybe using diffusers, maybe just placing everything correctly, and make sure you have you choose speakers with a really good wide dispersion at all frequencies, not just wide high frequency and
Right.
wide lows, but actually all the way through the
The whole
mid-range.
thing.
You can't tolerate errors, because if there are errors, then your brain's going to know, oh, that doesn't work for me. So if you do this, if you actually use a wide dispersion speaker, you will still end up with some comb filters. So I'm contrasting to what we saw earlier with the speaker that was maybe two directional. And I'm trying to show over here in this diagram that it's still not a perfect dip,
Mm-hmm.
but you, for one, by actually filling in the room with a lot of the right lateral reflected energy, you will actually fool your head, just like a magic trick fools you into believing that the wallet that was in my pocket over here is now in that other person's pocket. I still don't know how they do that, by the way. I don't know if you guys ever seen. I went and saw a Penn and Teller show years ago.
Oh, they're great.
What?
Yeah.
That's gotta be rigged. No
Yeah, it's
way.
nuts. Yeah.
And it's not. And it's like, dude, I don't get that. So, but if you use speakers with a wide horizontal dispersion and you don't overly absorb the lateral walls and the first reflections, like a lot of people say to do, you do a little absorption, a little scattering, a little bit of the stuff I talked about in my session on acoustical treatments,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to fill. What you're going to get is a phantom image from those left and right speakers, which is going to be offset, but then also a fill in from the room that's going to bring it back more to the center.
Got
Because
it.
when you're sitting here, you're getting a lot of fill-in energy and your brain's just going, I don't know, man, it just sounds like it's coming from over there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the idea, is if you can actually do a phantom center solution with wide dispersion speakers, equalized correctly in a room that's acoustically tuned correctly, and you can end up with less of this comb filtering error because it's filled in by the room, and a
Mm-hmm.
percent hasn't moved at all. That would be a lie. But did you hear that? By the way, I saw that
Yeah,
things got
yeah.
up just
You
one
actually, it
second.
was fun. You cut out for like just a second. I think I missed what you said.
Okay, I won't kid you to say that that with a pair of wide dispersion speakers equalized correctly, I won't kid you to say that the center position won't move at all, or that there
Got
won't
it.
be a slight degradation. It'll just be less. So
Yeah.
instead of having the center speaker be right around here, it's just shifted a little bit, but it stays largely in the middle of the room. So, um,
Real
and
quick,
then once you,
I'm sorry, Anthony. There was a question that came in real quick on this specific thing, and it's a term I've personally never heard before. Fahad says, "Wouldn't time intensity trading fix this?" I'm not familiar with time intensity trading. I don't recognize that.
so yeah, so the question is, hey, can you actually turn that speaker up, or aim that away from you? Do something so that the longer distance over here
Doesn't kill you
um,
so bad.
doesn't move that center speaker. So let's say if your seat position was always off axis, if
Right.
you knew that there was only one seat and it had to be off axis, what you could do is delay that speaker. You can't advance this, by the way, in the time domain, but you can
Right.
delay that speaker a little bit and shift the perceived position of the center speaker back to the middle. And it's incredibly effective. I love showing clients this if that's what the solution was for them. Uh, Even clients that have a pair of stereo speakers and they consider this as audiophile, but they say, no, I want to sit over here on the couch. Yeah,
Sure.
but your speakers are over here.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
but this is where I sit. Well, you delay one speaker a little bit
Right.
through digital EQ. Our speakers always have built-in DSP. Other speakers, you
Sure.
have to add a DSP processor, and then you can just twist a whole sound field to be perceived over there through time trading. Intensity doesn't work so well because in order to overcome this error, you have to turn this thing up probably 4, 5, 6 dB before
Wow.
you start to perceive that the image is changing. That arrival time thing called the Haas effect is very, very powerful. And if you
Hmm.
do that for that seat, what happens at that seat? What happens, if you make the
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
seat sound good, what happens in the middle? What happens on the left? So that kind of trading is fine. If you have one seat that's offset, you can fix that.
Hmm.
What I'm talking about generally over here is a room that has multiple seats, maybe 3 or 4 across the front, a second row in the back. So anyway, if you do all this, you end up with less peak and dip errors, and you can compensate that with the EQ to correct for the interaural error I talked about right in the beginning. Okay, so that is option 4. You know what? I think I may have lost track of myself. Hold on. Let's go back over here. Gonna make this right. That's option 4. So that's a pair of speakers that you choose to be good speakers. You choose to have wide dispersion and constant dispersion at all frequencies. And if you don't know if it is, call the manufacturer and say, I want to see the polar plots. I want to see the off-axis responses. And they're going to go, you know, like I often joke, they're going to go, security, there's a guy on the phone that's being abusive.
He's asking too many questions.
Ask the question, and you'd be surprised what the engineering team will actually send your way. It's like, wow, cool, I got those measurements here. You can have them. So pair speakers, wide dispersion, good quality, treat the lateral energy of the walls with a little bit of absorption and some scattering, and you can actually get to a point, by the way, tune and equalize this, compensate for the mid-range dip that happens, and you can get to a point where not only is that phantom center pretty good over here, but when you move off axis, it kind of stays there and the dialogue is still pretty clear. Okay, so this can work and certainly works better than a bad center speaker.
There you go.
Okay, so that was option 4. Let's go to option 5. Let's see if I counted my options correctly when I was preparing this. The option 5, all right. There's people who say, well, why don't we just bounce the sound off the screen? And they put a speaker up here trying to bounce it off the screen. So remember that when sound bounces, it bounces just like light off a mirror, which is that the angle of incidence and the angle of reflection are equal. And to make that work, I tried to make this diagram, even that's a little shallow. I'm trying to show that if you want the sound to appear to come from the middle of the screen for this listener, that speaker is going to have to be way back there.
Right.
If you put the speaker over here, that sound's going to bounce down here. Okay. So that can work, but the speaker is going to go way back there and you have a huge liability. Another thing that happens by putting it there is
now what about that guy? Yeah.
This listener is going to hear the radiation of that speaker bouncing off the top of the screen. And so rather than the sound come from the middle of the screen, now it's coming from the top or it's going to miss the screen. So right above the screen, you may end up with something else that diffuses the sound. So if you try this, be careful. Now, there's one more thing. There's this thing called crosstalk, which is
of course.
Even though you're aiming the speaker there, most speakers have plenty of vertical dispersion, off-axis sound, and there's going to be a sound going directly to your head here and there. And that sound is the shortest path. And the brain of a human being and most animals is programmed so that when there's the same sound coming from different places, the first arriving one is the one you go, that's where the real sound's coming from. So you're sitting there watching a movie and they're talking on the screen in front of you and everything you hear is coming from over there.
That almost seems like if you're in like a downtown area with lots of reflections and buildings and you hear somebody scream, I think it was from back there. I think so. Is that kind of the same idea?
Yeah. It's the first arriving sound. So if you're downtown and that bounce is coming off a building behind you, and that's the first sound, that's what you're gonna say. That's where it's coming from. So there is a way to make this work, and it's complicated. And you need to have a directional array, and you need to aim it at the right place. You have to do all the right things. You got to control the crosstalk, and that's the subject of a patent I filed a little while ago. I need to I need to go figure out how to follow up on that, which is time and money. There is a way to make it work, but it is not easy. So you'll see some stuff from a few manufacturers that say, oh, we'll put speakers here and there and they'll bounce off the screen. It's like, just remember that the angle of incidence, angle of reflection, all of that. And if you don't, if that speaker's over here, it's bouncing down that way. Or if you put it on the side wall and you bounce it off the screen, it's bouncing onto the opposite side wall and you're not there to hear it. And so it won't sound very good, not a very good option. All right. So some conclusions. Getting the front channel sound to be good is challenging. There's a lot of complicated issues. Right in the beginning of this thing, an hour and 25 minutes ago, or actually after the intro, I talked about the 5 things you need to be thinking about simultaneously, which is, the height, the width, the comb filters, the standing waves, all this other stuff. There's a lot of things to consider. Large solid displays make it even harder because just putting 3 front speakers behind an acoustically transparent screen, you're just worrying about acoustics and electroacoustics. Now we
Right.
have this big thing that gets in the way of where we want to put our speakers. So you have to, excuse me, you have to be prepared to design and analyze really carefully. Don't expect miracles. It's
Hmm.
not going to be as clean and as beautiful as with an acoustically transparent screen. It just won't.
Sure.
Got to be prepared to experiment a lot. So one of the things I love to do as much as possible is to set expectations and let the client,
Yes. Yes.
tell your client, look, the ideal condition is this. This is a
Hmm.
compromised condition. I'll do the best I can to make it as clean as possible, but you got
Right.
to understand that the trade-off for having a big, super sharp, super beautiful, super wonderful picture is the sound's going to be a little compromised, and we'll do everything we can to make it as good as possible. And they're
Sure.
going to go, well, I don't care. I'm not an audiophile.
Right.
That's a common answer I get. I have a tin ear. I can't tell. It's like, wait, you don't have to be an audiophile to sit there through a
To
movie
hear
and go,
dialogue. Yeah.
what?
Right. Right.
What audiophiles don't hear dialogue any better than average people.
Right. Good point.
So I like to be clear about that. All right. If you want to read a bunch of stuff about all this, here's a list of great resources, great books written on all of this stuff.
I think that's
I'm going to flash this on here, but you can see it on YouTube. There's another sheet of this stuff.
that's
Probably
this one, right?
there you go, Master
Yeah.
Handbook of Acoustics. There you go. That's the first one. A very, very good book that is very current and very modern for the things we do is the book that Dr. Floyd Toole wrote, now in its third edition, called Sound Reproduction. And I even put the ISBN over here if you wanted
Oh,
to.
nice.
All right. If you need to reach me, here's my contact info. If you want to come visit, you're welcome to drop by. We're almost done with the lockdown. Our region is starting to open up.
Good.
So
Good
you
to
can
hear.
actually come and visit. You can see come and listen to a demo in our showroom over here, the other one that's
Excellent.
in the large room. Or you can drop me an email. If you have any questions, you can also send them to Jason so that
Sure.
everybody can see the questions and everybody can see the answers.
Yeah, guys, I've got a couple questions here I want to run by Anthony. If you didn't have any questions, feel free to drop off and catch up with the YouTube video if you'd like to. But I'll toss a couple of these questions to you, Anthony. The question came in real early from Fahad, and I think it was when we were talking about Skywalker Ranch, but maybe just a curious question from him. He says, "Are there any mixed rooms that are capable of subsonic production?"
So that's a good question, and I actually don't know the answer. I know
Hmm.
that the better subwoofers today go way low. The
Right.
formats all allow to go down to 3 hertz.
Hmm.
And by and large, 99% or 99.5%, I would say, 90% of statistics are made up on the spot, but I would say the great majority of film soundtracks go down to about 30 or 25 hertz and stop there. There's occasional really low frequency stuff, like was pointed out several sessions ago, but I don't know if anybody actually has infrasonic. There's Meyer Sound, a great
Hmm.
sound reinforcement company that also makes cinema speakers now,
Right.
has, I can't believe I forget the name. It's too early, not enough coffee. The VLF subwoofer series, I forget, that goes, way
Yeah.
down there. Not a lot of rooms have that. So my answer is, gee, I don't know. But, maybe I'll try to find out.
Be cool to play in one. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Samir says some woven gain screens have such fine weaves that they look like solid screens. In your opinion, which is the best woven fabric material with the highest gain possible? It's a screen question.
Uh-huh. Not our topic today, although it's slightly related.
Yeah,
So I am not aware of a way to do a really good gain condition on a screen.
that's the hard part. We
That's
talk
the
about
hard
this
part.
in ISF. Yep.
So the way it's normally done is, you make a piece of vinyl, you coat it. You either perforate it first and then coat it later, or you coat it and then you perforate it, depending on the
Yeah.
process. But the
Right.
coating that works for the application we're interested in, which is to be able to have the lights on or have ambient light from a window, you have to do 2 things. The coating needs to have high reflectivity, so the screen needs to be, I'm going to use the word retroreflective, even though that means that the light's coming back from where it came from, but it just needs to beam the light back to where either with the reflection being in the opposite direction or in the same direction, depending on where the projector is relative to the screen. So it's a combination of that coating that beams the light back, for one, compared to a flat white screen. And then it's also a gray matrix on the screen to lower the perceived light reflection. If you do those two things, you end up with a better perceived contrast.
Right.
And it's important to say perceived contrast. I guess you can measure it all, but you're not magically going to create something from a passive device. It does give better blacks because you don't have the light reflections are being directed somewhere else than your eyes,
Sure.
for one. And then the dark matrix in the material makes it look darker. That is done on a solid surface that's micro-perforated. Once you're talking about a woven material, I don't know of a process to be able to coat that after the weave, or that the material is actually stranded with a weave. There is a manufacturer out there that claims to have a woven screen with a gain of 1.2. 1.2 is such a small amount of gain. You know, we're looking for much higher than that to be able to
1.4,
use
1.6, something like that. Yeah.
Well, actually, the Firehawk,
like 1.8.
Okay, I've thrown a bunch of different brand names. Okay, so as an example, Stuart makes a screen called the Firehawk that has a net gain of I'm gonna say that the Firehawk has a net gain, I think, of one. Let's just call it 1 or 1.2 net gain. It is dark gray. So compared to white, if you didn't put a retroreflective coating on it, the compared to that, it would be a gain of 0.3 or something.
Right.
And then there's a retroreflective coating that if the screen was white, you would have a gain of 3 or 4. So it's a very beamy screen.
Right.
Increases the light back to your eyeballs and away from the walls by a factor of 3, with the ensuing side effects. You know, you talked about LCDs off axis.
Hotspots.
There's a huge hotspot in those because you move off axis. And the light changes like crazy, both in intensity and color, by the way.
Sure.
So if it didn't have a dark gray coating, it would have a perceived light gain of 3 or 4, but then you coat it and it's back down to 1.
Right.
That's what you have to do if you want to use a projection system that's acoustically transparent, with an acoustically transparent screen in a room that has ambient lights on or has white walls. So I don't see how to do that on a woven material. If anybody is making one or knows of one, definitely
let us know.
Me know.
Sure.
So the other thing is there's a lot of different manufacturers now that have very, very fine woven materials that are essentially, you know, you have to like get this close before you see any of the weave, so it'll resist even 8K projection if that ever comes to.
Nice. Okay, 2 more. One from another Anthony. He says, thoughts on the dual center speakers, such as the Artisan dual centers. They are left and right hybrids. They actually contain a center channel. It's 4 separate speakers, sounds like. How have you run into those types of situations before?
I don't like to talk bad about anybody, but if you take the center channel sound that's supposed to come out of a speaker and you decode it, you put it in the center speaker, oh, you can't go there, and you put it back to a pair of left and right speakers, it's a phantom center.
Sure.
There's nothing special about doing that, with the exception of that particular speaker. And with all due respect to my good buddies at Artisan that are very good people, it would be better to just have a regular phantom center out of a full speaker. Instead, they're breaking it into 2 small speakers. In a value that's entirely too small to have any decent bass, any decent sensitivity. That is like, it's like completely nuts. I hope you follow me through. So I'm going to say that again.
Yeah, I've got you.
By the time you put it all back at the same place as it was originally, by the time you put it all back to the left and rights, it's phantom center. There's no benefit. Many years ago, what people would do for this is they would have you were talking about, they'd have a pair of tower speakers. They would decode the center in the world of ProLogic, and then they would put that center into 2 small cheesy speakers sitting on top of the left and right towers. So now you have the worst of all worlds. You have shitty sound coming out of a crappy center speaker, put back in the phantom center where the sound quality is bad. No, that solution for that would have been to say, turn off the center completely, play it out of the good left and right tower speakers, and call it a day. That was like complete heresy.
That's it for the questions, guys. Thank you so much. If you have any more, feel free. We're kind of out of time now, but Anthony's email address, he was had it up on the screen before. My email address is real simple. It's jason@avproglobal.com. Thank you guys so much for the participation and for all of the questions. Anthony, you and I, we're going to be taking off next week, correct? And we're going to
Correct. Yeah.
continue on. I think we've got maybe like 4, I think, episodes left, and that'll do it for the audio expert series. So thank you so much again for your time
Great.
today. I know this is going to be a hot topic, especially going forward. So I'm glad we talked about it today. If you guys have any other questions, again, feel free to email us. Anthony, if you don't have anything else for the listeners, I don't have anything else for you or them. I think
Yeah,
that'll do it for today.
I'm just going to say that big fixed screen displays are here to stay.
Yes.
There's, if you follow all this, there's ways to make their sound not suck too bad. Ways above and beyond just putting a sound bar underneath, which is in reality, kind of a simple cop out.
Right.
Some of them sound okay, some of them don't. There's ways to make it work, just like I said in my conclusions. Think about it, study it. If you got any more questions, send me emails, and you can end up with pretty good sound with an astounding picture that those things give you. All right.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so
Guys.
much. Thank you, Anthony, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Sounds good.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.